Welcome into the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Today is going to be a little bit of a heavy show, folks. Not going to lie. We're going to talk today about an epidemic in America. We're going to talk about mass shootings. We're going to talk about one that affected Maine, Lewiston, Maine, and pretty recently, 2023. A shooting that was, let's just put it this way, devastating. Devastating to an area of the country that really does not deal with such a violent outburst as a mass shooting. When you think mass shootings, you don't really think heartland of America. You don't think of quiet rural towns. You think of areas that are urban. You think urban warfare. Let's face it, when you think mass shootings, you think of somewhere where people are poor. And I'm just talking straight here, folks. We tend to want to put that in poorer areas. We tend to want to put it in areas where we can file it away and don't have to deal with it. We shouldn't. Mass shootings are an everyday thing, no matter your class, no matter your economic structure, no matter what. It has become an epidemic in America. We're going to say some tough things today, folks. You know, a lot of politicians want to file this away. They want to file it away as to one thing or another and then go on with their day. It's interesting because now we're facing a presidential election, and on the show, we don't talk too much politics, but today we're going to, because gun control will be put on the ticket as Joe Biden was replaced with Kamala Harris. She's now looking for a vice president as of this taping. One of those is Senator Kelly, who will bring gun control to the top of the ticket should he be picked as a vice president. And it should be put on at least the idea of doing something about mass shootings in America should be put out there. It should be a major part of our discussion here in America. How we deal with it should be put on the table. What we're talking about today is a fascinating new book, The Lewiston Shootings, an All-American Tragedy, by our guest, Robert Conlin, who takes a very fair and balanced look at this subject coming from the state of Maine. And this is a guy who, let's face it, is from that area of the country. Robert Conlin says, whoever thought of the phrase jack of all trades, master of none must have had me in mind. Either that or I liked it so much I decided to adopt it as my own. In any event, he says he's worked in more than a few occupations in his lifetime. In fact, he made up a list of all the ones that exceeded 3 months. So here's what he's been involved in: busboy, waiter, bartender, Navy cook, security guard, bicycle mechanic, overseas tour guide, bank clerk, warehouse worker, brick mason, chimney sweep, auto salesman, oyster farmer, retail store owner, news reporter, and editor and magazine publisher. So why not be a book author? Why not? And you know what? He's a darn good one. He put this book out there about this difficult subject, and he did a darn good job with it as well. Let's bring him in right now to True Crime Tuesday. Robert Conlin, thank you so much for being on the program.
Tim, thanks for having me. And after hearing that, I sound like I'm a schizophrenic, but
No.
I have attention deficit disorder, one or the other. But in any event, I did all those things, and now I wrote this book. So,
and a wonderful book at that, sir. Thank you so much for putting that out there into the universe.
Thank you.
This is a difficult subject that we're going to deal into today, and I think we should probably deal with it a little slowly, and then we'll ramp up very quickly. Lewiston, Maine, a sleepy town that, let's face it, hardworking people, right? Give us a little background on Lewiston and why this is such a shock that something such as a mass shooting happened.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Lewiston is, believe it or not, is a third largest. I think it's the third largest city in Maine, but with a population of 37,000, which puts that into context in terms of our urban areas. And honestly, it is a very gritty, sort of a hard hit city in recent years. It was a former mill city, textile mills, gigantic textile mills on the Androscoggin River. that ran into some really hard times and has experienced some sort of big city violence in terms of crime and fentanyl use and opiate use. So it's not immune to any crime by any means, and that might come across a little bit in the book, and certainly in the depictions and the teasers or whatever. But Lewiston is it's had its share of problems, but it's and it still does. But it was never a place that anybody expected, as is the state itself, where a crime of this magnitude would occur. It just was the last thing that people expected. I think there was a sense of maybe there was some immunity here. Not, obviously not it just in a subconscious sense of that. So when it did happen, it was a major blow to the city and to the area. And of course, with so few people, there was so many 6 degrees of separation in terms of who knew who and who was related to who and the victims. So it was a big deal.
Now, the one thing that comes through as far as Lewiston goes is that the people there, they work hard, they play hard, they seem to be a tight knit community, which is one of the nice
Yeah.
things to hear about that area of the country. And a lot of small towns, it's a nice thing to have. One of the things that
Yeah.
we don't necessarily have in bigger cities or bigger suburbs. It seems
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of times these days in America, where the bigger the suburb, the more you don't know your next door neighbor, or you might know your next door neighbor, but you don't know the neighbor 2 doors over. Um,
Right.
and that's unfortunate that we're not as tight of a community anymore as we used to be. Uh, what what's I guess really sad, but yet really charming about the book is that when we talk about the areas that Robert Card II, who is the shooter in this particular book and the
Mm-hmm.
perpetrator in this book, um, the lives that he rips apart, and that's what part of what I commend you on doing a wonderful job about is highlighting the lives of these people who were torn apart. Um, these people that suffered around the victims and the victims themselves, they all seem like such a tight knit community that one knows another, or one went to school with another, or you have two best friends that actually tried to stop Robert Card II,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
known each other all their lives.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's
Go ahead. Go ahead.
that was yeah, those two fellows, Jason Walker and Michael Delauriers, kindergarten, knew each other since kindergarten, and as close as two men can be without being brothers, really. Were just incredibly courageous and trying to stop this at the bowling alley. Single, bare hands, just went after the shooter when they heard the first shot. So yeah, in the broader picture, uh, it is a tight knit. I mean, it's a small state. There's only 1.3 million people, and a lot of people just, they just know each other, and the communities are very tight, and the people are very tight, and there's a sense of, I mean, it's changing somewhat. Of course, there's a lot of influx of people, and so it's, I'm not going to make it sound like it's Mayberry and, you know, um,
Sure.
Barney Fife is running around and Sheriff Griffith, but it still is a place where people do um, have a sense of community. And so when this tragedy took place, and these innocent victims, as all victims are when they're generally in a mass shooting like that, where they were just out for a night of fun. That's all they were doing was bowling and playing cornhole or playing pool, and they were just connecting with friends and family. And the bowling alley community was really tight. Most of them had known each other for a long time, and there was a real sense of strong community spirit in that place. And then, at Schemengees, the bar where he went after he shot the people in the bowling alley, same thing. There was a deaf cornhole league playing that night, and there were four of the victims were deaf, and three others were deaf or wounded. That was especially sad only because they are a very tight knit community. A lot of them went to the same only school for the deaf on an island off the coast of Portland, and and then the state being so large, they're spread out, but they sort of gathered in a place like Schemengees to be able to stay connected to each other. So, that was really tragic that the victims, and of course they were at a disadvantage because they couldn't hear the shots. So
Yeah.
community, yeah, that's the predominant theme through the whole thing was community, and then the sense of the security of the community was shattered. And that goes to the people in the state also, because I was mentioning to somebody recently that the year before 2022, there were 18 homicides in the whole state. So
Which
there
is
were,
amazing.
yeah,
I don't mean to stop you here, Robert, but
yeah,
that's an amazing statistic. Only, what did you say, 18 or 19 homicides in the entire state alone of
yeah,
Maine?
yeah, the year before, and then of course 18 at one time in that shooting. So that, I mean, that's just to put it in scale of, that's why the impact was so dramatic. And I think there's something to be said about that. I do touch on in the book, there's a gun culture in Maine, a hunting culture. It's a rural state, and a lot of people grow up hunting, and gun ownership is pretty high statistically in the state. Um, Having said that, there's very few crimes committed with guns in the state, which is an argument that gun supporters will say, well, look, we're a responsible uh, gun ownership community here in the state, and you can't argue with that.
No.
Up until this point, there had been no real example of outright violence with guns like that. So
Well, and the other fact that you throw in here, and again, we're going to try to be as balanced as we can today. The
mhm.
other fact that you throw in there is the percentage of gun owners in Maine that actually hunt is pretty
Mhm.
low, isn't it?
It's yeah, I was surprised by it. I figured most of the gun owners would be hunters, but I think just tracing the amount of gun hunting licenses versus gun ownership, the hunting license ratio was lower than I thought it would be. But so
I don't
there are
remember
people
the
that
exact
just,
number, but it's in the book. But I want to say it's less than
yeah,
50%, correct?
it is, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
yeah, yeah.
And so that tells you, people are carrying guns for safety, or they're using them for target practice. So there's there's certainly an element. I mean, my sons have guns and they like to go to the range and shoot.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of people doing that, and there are some that use them for protection. But there's not a lot of random crime in the state, so it's an interesting paradox that there were so many guns, and so that was when the outcry, of course, after the shootings from gun opponents, is that we need to change the laws, and there were some laws changed as a result. And the other side of the spectrum said, this is an anomaly. Why should we go change laws for something that happened only once? Up until this point, we were a responsible gun owning state,
And
relatively.
that's something I want to talk about, Robert, in the second part of the program, because
Yeah.
there's some arguments here that we should run through or at least touch on. Of course, you're not going to
Yeah.
solve the world in a day, and we're not going to do that between the two of us here on this program. But
Right.
there's some interesting things that came up in this Lewiston shooting incident that are a microcosm of what happens nationally. And it's interesting how it gets thrown out kind of laissez-faire by politicians, yet they never quite nail it down. And in a microcosm, it gets addressed by the state of Maine. It gets addressed locally. It gets addressed even within the county. And it somehow it doesn't get solved. Don't get me wrong. But there are some things that get cleaned up a little bit that are probably
Yeah.
better on a state level in Maine than
Hmm.
they are even nationally.
Hmm.
Um, and to that, I guess I feel a little bit better about what they're doing in Maine than they are nationally. And we'll explain a little bit when we get to the second half of the program.
Yeah.
I want to go through the actual case here, and I want to talk a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's start with Robert Card II himself,
Yeah.
because he is an interesting example of why you can't necessarily take after the shooter and say and villainize the shooter.
Right. Right.
Let's talk a little bit about him, Robert.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Robert
Yeah.
Card II, and talk about he is why he's not sympathetic. Let's not get that wrong, but why Robert Card II is an interesting study in how to build a mass shooter.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I first of all, you're right. He's atypical in that I think our perception of mass shooters is angry, uh, angry young, usually white male who goes down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and etc. A lot of anger, a lot of anti either racist or gender specific violent tendencies, and he didn't display any of that. He was a 40-year-old truck driver, father of one son, 18 years old. He was in the Army Reserve for 20 years. He was a sergeant, first class in the Army Reserve, 20-year veteran. He did not fight, did not go on any active duty combat tours. He did train his unit in Maine, train the cadets at West Point for about 9 years. I think he participated in training them in small arms, machine guns, grenades, and we can circle back to the grenades because I think it's
Yes. Yep.
relevant to his brain health.
Yep.
But he, that he he otherwise had was seemed to be a fairly normal, fairly well-adjusted individual, not perfect by any means. His ex-wife I spoke to on a couple of occasions at length, gave me a sort of a different version of who he was because their relationship was very acrimonious. But by most accounts, he was a pretty steady, dependable, um, human being who didn't really exhibit any real irrational behavior or any real violent behavior at all. So it more or less seemed to have come out of the blue. But going back and talking to I spent time with his best friend, his ex-wife, his sister. I spoke to, and just to get a sense of who he was and how it all started. It seemed to start about even more than a year. Probably it sounds like about 16 months before the shootings. He started to have a belief that people were calling him a pedophile. And this was the overriding number one issue in his head. And it became, I think, all consuming. By the end, it was all consuming. Everybody in his world, it went from just strangers referring to him as a pedophile to virtually everybody he came across, and then his own son, and then his family, and then his best friend. And then he was convinced that there was a conspiracy theory, a conspiracy revolving around this, belief that he was a pedophile. And it's an interesting story, I think, how that evolved and how the origin of that story, and then some of the real tragic ironies of that story is it. I think it's definitely the root of the case is that he was taking revenge on people he thought were referring to him as a pedophile. That was his intention.
I also have a strange theory as well after reading your book, Robert. And
Hmm.
I, if you don't mind me saying, I
No,
can expound on it a little bit. If you don't mind me expounding too a little bit on the circumstances surrounding Robert Card II.
hmm.
Um, and if it's too spoilery, I can edit here too. Um, you mentioned in the book that Robert Card II had hearing aids,
Yes.
and that we all know hearing aids sometimes as we and he had purchased these hearing aids kind of over the counter. There's a
Yeah. Yeah.
new way of getting hearing aids where you can get them over the counter. They're a little bit cheap.
Exactly.
He didn't
Yeah.
have them fit by an audiologist.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, well, sometimes those things can feed back a little bit. You can get crosstalk from different
Yeah.
radio towers. You can get crosstalk from cell phones, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, he might have driven him a little paranoid, but there's something else here at play, and we're going to talk a little bit too about, and we'll bring it up here in a second here too, because there's another interesting angle here. I want you to bring it up here, Robert. And that's
Hmm.
this. There's an incident in the book you mentioned where he's at the bowling alley. He's at Just in Time, and he thinks he's being set up. And I think you know the one that I'm talking
Yeah.
about. where
Yeah.
a young girl, 2, 3 years old, comes up. And like most little kids do, they kind of, in an innocent, flirtatious way, she kind of jumps onto a stool or a bench next to him. And she's wearing a little skirt or whatever. And she kind of falls back on the bench and she kind of raises her legs or whatever. And her diaper is exposed. It's just innocent, right?
Hmm.
But
Right.
at that point, Robert Card II believes that he's being lured into a trap
Mm.
by whoever it is that he thinks is uh, thinks he's a pedophile. Like they want to
Yeah.
out him as a pedophile.
Yeah.
Now, psychologically, and I think you know this as well, Rob, psychologically, there's a part of me that says, wait a minute, he's tempted. I think even though he has a son, Colby, uh, Robert Card does, has a son that Colby that has never said, I was touched or molested by my father. He's never attested to that. And I want to state that plainly right here. I think Robert has had urges. Robert Card II has had urges or had urges. And that was part of the reason why he was so conflicted. And part of the reason why he claims others were trying to out him. And I'm using air quotes here for those of you who are listening to the audio podcast.
Yeah.
I think there was deep seated guilt there for that feeling, knowing that he was an upstanding man, an army man,
Hmm.
man of morals, yet he's having these feelings. And for him to go to therapy to try to work this out, or for him to try to find a way out of this, for him is, in his eyes, disgusting. He's in conflict and he's in pain and he doesn't know how to resolve that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So he's trying to blame others so that he
Yeah.
has a reason out.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Uh, yeah, it does. I can't, I certainly can't dispute that or find any, tangible reason to say that's a real stretch. I didn't go there and I didn't, because there's no way for me to, I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist. I have no therapy background and there was nothing to, to allow me to
Sure, sure.
pursued. So I didn't. But has a thought crossed my mind that could have been the case? It could have been the case. I mean, it's behavior that the uh, absolute obsession with that particular notion. And I'll give you a little background as to the origin. It sounds like you read the book, so thank you for doing
Oh, I
that.
did. Yes, from cover to
Yeah,
cover. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, thank you. The origin of the hearings the hearing aids are interesting too. So it was sort of like a toxic stew, everything all sort of mixing together. I think um, we'll go back to the grenades. I think afterwards, after he died, his brain went off to Boston University, and they leading CTA
We, we
traumatic brain injury.
we should explain first to people that Robert Card II trained for West Point, was it?
Yeah, he trained the cadets at West Point.
Okay.
Small arms, grenades. A lot of times, grenades. They would go 2 weeks every summer and train cadets. Um, so the brain study came back in April, and they found that he had traumatic brain injury, severe traumatic brain injury, and more than likely the grenade throwing was a huge part of that.
And these were
And
concussion grenades. They weren't just regular grenades. These were concussion
yeah,
grenades that could
yeah,
cause
they
PT.
were the fragmentation grenades, and the damage would have been caused by blast overpressure, not by the noise, but by the blast pressure waves that are created repeatedly over exposure to that over a long period of time.
Yeah.
And actually, the Army is doing something about that. The Department of Defense is doing something. They just passed the Blast Overpressure Act to mandate that all new recruits in all four branches of the service given a cognitive assessment test when they first come in, so they can baseline test them and then test them later to see if there's any injuries caused as a result of their training. So they're working on that, and that actually was precipitated before this incident, but I think the card incident certainly has spurred that along and helped get that the final signature. Um, but I digress a little bit. So the combination of the brain injury, the damage that he had, and the fact that when they found his body at Maine Recycling, the origin story to him saying that people were calling him a pedophile started there. His best friend Sean, who worked with him, who I spoke to, and his sister both confirmed that he complained that they were calling him a pedophile there, and which led me to start thinking, well, why would they call him? Why would they be referring to him as a pedophile? He had just gotten his new hearing aids, you see, so he was having a hard time adjusting them, and he was shutting them off sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And his friend told me that he would then see people's mouths moving, but hear no sound, and then he started to conflate all these things. But then it occurred to me, well, he was also hearing. Other friends said that he could hear at superhuman distances. He was picking up conversations from way far away because he just couldn't get the volume right on them. They were Bluetooth enabled, and like you said, there's cross interference, and so I think so. Then I started to wonder, well, why would that have started there? Like what would have led that? And I went onto the Maine Sex Offender Registry and found that there were at least a dozen Maine recycling workers who are on that list themselves, who are sex offenders, who then must have seen when they went on the list that there is a Robert card on that sex offender registry, but it's not the same Robert card. It's an unusual name.
Yeah, it is,
and it's just a tragic irony that there is another Robert card on there. So I think what happened was that, and his sister told me. So his sister told me that he complained to her that they said that they saw his name on the registry. But then she went on to look to confirm that, and she must have put in she did a search and she put in Robert Card the second, and I tried it and it doesn't come up. It only came up, only Robert Card, if it was typed in, would bring up Robert Card. So I think she didn't see it, so she went back and told him, no, this is crazy, you're not on the list. But there was a Robert Card on the list. So I think he overheard the employees there at Maine Recycling talking about that. And we can get back to why that's important later at the very end of the story when they found him, right? So
absolutely.
Why did he go there, right? So all these things were happening, and it just, like I said, it got worse and worse. He just started to believe that story over and over. Everybody he accused in his circle, in his world, he accused at one time or another. He even, threatened. When he made a delivery as a truck driver a couple of weeks before the shooting, he told the workers there that they should stop talking about him, or he's going to snap and do something to them. So he was already signaling that he had intentions to commit some violence. And I think the evidence is pretty clear that as this is going on, and even despite having a 19-day stay in a psychiatric hospital, while he was at that West Point training program, he had a meltdown and he was committed there.
Like, I tell you what, Robert, let's take our break here. And as you said, there were signs that Robert was about to commit something, that he was about to take action on what was not necessarily a sudden snap, but what was a building psychosis. When we come back, we'll talk about that building psychosis.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll talk about what it was that led to, we've talked about what led to it, but we'll talk about what's building and what's happening as Robert is getting ready to set up this mass shooting. And as Robert Conlin has, our guest has basically alluded to, there's a stay in a mental hospital, which is actually recommended by one of his superiors at the Army Reserve, or in the Army. And he has friends that are recommending that he get some help as well. How he treats his friends, however, is a whole different ballgame. We'll talk about that as well. We'll also talk about what he does immediately after he gets out of the mental hospital and how he kind of, let's just say, presents himself at the mental hospital. It's very interesting. Robert Conlin's our guest. The book is fascinating, folks. It's a fascinating look and a balanced look at mass shootings, especially in small town America and small town Maine. The Lewiston shootings and All-American Tragedy is available right now And we have a link in the description of this program. I encourage you to go get this book. It is a very detailed book, or a detailed book, folks, a very detailed account of the Lewiston shootings all the way up into current day. And it's very fascinating, folks. It takes a look not just at the story of Robert Card II, the shooter, but it's a detailed look into the victims and the victims' families and the legislation of what's been going on in Maine since that fateful day in Lewiston, Maine. When we come back, we'll talk about what happened with Robert Card leading up to the shootings. We'll also talk about some of the victims involved in the shootings, some of the heroic stories behind what happened that fateful day as well. And we'll talk about the legislation. What did Maine do differently that maybe we should take a look at here in America? It's all coming up with Robert Conlin, the Lewiston shootings, an all-American tragedy next on True Crime Tuesday. Welcome back to the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. My guest is Robert Conlin. The book is The Lewiston Shootings, an All-American Tragedy. When we left you last, we were talking about Robert Card II, who is the shooter in this mass shooting. We left you at the point where he's starting to ramp up. Of course, he's been an instructor at West Point. He's been dealing with concussion grenades. There's some outward signs that not only CTE, but a defective hearing aid has caused him some issues. He's got some other issues going on. He thinks that people are calling him a pedophile. He's dealt with some anger there. And he's at a point where, Robert, at this point, the people around him, his family, his friends, are starting to realize that Robert Card II is not going down a healthy path, and he may be getting violent. Now, they're worried also about the guns around him and that he may do something with those guns. Who is that first notices that there's a real problem and we got to do something with this guy?
Yeah, I think his son would have been the first really to call it out, and that would have been probably a year prior to the shootings. And progressively, it got worse. He eventually asked his son to move out of the trailer that they lived in Bowden, a small town outside of Lewiston. And his son eventually went to his mother, Robert Card's ex-wife, Carol Lamb, and said, "I'm really concerned about Dad. He's saying all these things, and I don't know how to stop him, and I don't know how to explain to him that this is not the case." So she went to a local sheriff's department in Saginaw County and spoke to a deputy in May and laid out all the concerns, and the concerns being the paranoia and also the fact that he had 10 to 15 firearms, and that the mix was, they were concerned. And she didn't want the sheriff's deputy to let him know that either she or her son, his son, were notifying them. She didn't want him to know that they were involving the police. He was a very private guy. That's the thing that, would have upset him, they thought. So they said, "We just want to let you know, and can you do something about it?" So that first deputy, I have to say that, there was a commission that was put together to public hearings to discuss the response of law enforcement and the Army to the numerous red flags that eventually came up. And this first deputy, Deputy Carlton, I can find no fault at all with his response. He went out of his way to really try to understand what was going on. He didn't have enough to implement some kind of a protective custody. There was no threat. At that time, there was no threat. But he was concerned, and he even looked into the hearing aid issue to see if there was a possible link between the hearing aids and the paranoia. And so there's no fault at all, I don't think, with his response.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, his Army Reserve compatriots, I think that's another story. A number of them were civilian law enforcement. So the Army Reserve is a little different setup. There's a lot to understand about what's the difference between an active duty and a reserve. When do they have jurisdiction over their soldier? and that's limited. He has to be on duty um, before they can force him to get any mental health help, and they cannot take away his personal firearms. They're not entitled to do that. There's a federal law about that. So they became aware in about April, right around the same time that the sheriff did, that there was something really wrong here. His friends in the unit, uh, one friend in particular, really noticed, and he was trying to call attention to it. And then the others, his superiors, his commanding officer, and a number of the other NCOs in the unit, um, witnessed, some of the behavior, and they became concerned. And up to that point, they didn't. There wasn't much they could do about it either. And it wasn't until July when they went to that training at West Point, and then he just sort of had a meltdown, and he assaulted one of his fellow members. I'll keep in mind that in the unit, like I said, there were a number of civilian law enforcement. His commanding officer was a police officer in New Hampshire. Another one who witnessed the assault was the sheriff in the neighboring county. And there were two or three others who also witnessed him assaulting, not violent, not terribly violent. I mean, it was, you might say, he pushed him, he shoved him, and he got very confrontational with him. He said, "You're calling me a pedophile." So having witnessed that, they decided, and then he barricaded himself into his the barracks.
Yeah.
So they called the New York State Police, because it was a National Guard base, which is a state jurisdiction, and they command directed him to a psychiatric hospital. And he went there for 19 days, and and recently last week the Army released its own report. I was astonished, frankly. It sort of contradicted what I wrote in the book, which is that they were digging in their heels and sticking their head in the sand and trying to forget that it happened. They actually reprimanded three of the unit members for dereliction of duty, which, yes, they didn't name any names. I suspect I know who they were, one being his commanding officer. But to put some context into that, by this, after July, they had ample opportunity to understand. Now they know that and then eventually he threatens to shoot up the reserve base in Saco. He punches his best friend in the face, and which prompts his best friend to write a text to say, "I think he's going to do a mass shooting," and send it to the sergeant. And then the sergeant called up Saginaw Hawk County. So they had all this information by then. He was getting worse and worse and worse. And they also knew what they ignored was that he was prescribed a diagnosis and a treatment plan while he was at that facility. But the commanding officer and nobody in the unit followed up to find out what that was. And they basically just, it seemed like they washed their hands of him, and just sort of ignored the fact that they were aware of his deteriorating condition. Wow. And as I point out in the book, the fact that they were in the Army unit with him was one thing, but the fact that they were civilian law enforcement officers gave them should have given them a double barrel sense of responsibility to help him out, to make sure that he was getting the help that he was given in the facility, although it doesn't seem like it really helped at all.
Yeah.
But they had a treatment plan. They had medication for him. And then they also said that he shouldn't have any weapons, personal firearms. That was a diagnosis from the Army psychiatrist. Despite this, everybody seemed to just want to ignore all those signs. And when they made the call in September, after his friend sent the text that said, "I think he's going to do a mass shooting," he had just punched his friend in the face, best friend of 18 years, finished their friendship. He was all done after that and never spoke again. At that point, he was clearly, there was no helping him. He was going to need some intervention. His friend was, President, his friend recognized that, and he contacted the unit. They contacted the sheriff's department, and they said, "We need to do a welfare check on Robert Card." And this is the second response from law enforcement that really has to be questioned. And one reason we wrote the book was to open up some eyes about these warning signs and to give a, a sort of a template of, man, if you see things like this again, if you hear about things like this again, please, these guys get all the training they need. It's a small rural county, but they get the training, protective custody, how to deal with somebody with mental health and firearms. The training is there. And they hadn't used that training at all. So when they responded to him, this particular sheriff's deputy decided to back off. He went to his trailer and knocked on the door. He could hear him moving around. He was aware of all these things now, that he was violent, threatened violence, was heavily armed. And despite that, and it's understandable in the field at the time, he decided not to push it, not to try it. He couldn't gain entry to get protective custody in the state of Maine. You could not get a warrant to even go in. So they would have had to wait until he came outside or was somewhere else. And then they could have taken him into protective custody. They could not go in and get him. So it was understandable he decided not to do that. I fully get that. But then what's really impossible to understand, and even knowing the story full well, I still shake my head, is that this deputy decided not to do anything else, that he would contact the family and to see that the family would take the weapons away. But he wouldn't follow up on that at all. So he considered the case closed once he spoke to the family that day. And he never, ever again checked on it. He went on vacation the next day. Didn't tell anybody about the case. Didn't say to one of his compatriots, listen, will you guys check in on this guy, blah, blah, blah. Nothing like that. Neither did his superior, by the way, so who was aware of it. And then he went on vacation. And then when he came back from vacation, he lifted they put out a bolo, File 6 is called a bolo. Be on the lookout. Dangerous, has firearms. Mental health is, etc. He lifted that and just removed it without checking to see if there was any resolution to the case, whether anybody had spoken to him, whether anybody had any interaction with him, whether anybody had taken his firearms, whether he still possessed them, whether, nothing, zero. So this, that was the blatant law enforcement egregious response. I think it's pretty hard to argue with that. This sheriff's deputy later on,
if I can, before we go any further here, Robert, just a comment here, and that's this. That's pretty much the national perspective of it too. Is, well, we can only go so far, and that is, if there's a mental issue with someone and they're possessing firearms, well, we can't tread on their rights. If they're behind closed doors, we're not gonna push it. It's up to the family at that point to administer whatever they need to in order to get that person's psychiatric help. It's a mental issue. It's a mental illness issue. We're out of it. We've diagnosed the problem. We wash our hands of it. We're good. We've just solved the problem of mass shootings in America. Let's move on to the next issue, which is incredibly irresponsible. That's the best.
I couldn't agree with you more. And listen, there's enough case history right now of all these shootings where there are red flags everywhere, and that that they are ignored. And that's the hard part to understand, is that with all the training that's available, the hard part to understand is how these red flags can continue to be ignored at the peril of public safety. All right, so it's a tough job. I've said it over and over. I would not want to be a cop in this day and age. Tough job.
I wouldn't either.
A lot of mental health stuff, a lot of issues, a lot of drugs, tons of firearms. I would not want to be a cop. I couldn't do it. I don't have the disposition for that. But I didn't swear to uphold and protect. I didn't take the pledge either. So
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, if you take the pledge, your public safety is foremost. And it seemed in this case with both the Army and the Saginaw County Sheriff's responses that, they didn't want to do any more than they had to, that it was that it was too difficult. Oh, there were some hurdles to taking him into protective custody. There was a law, a mechanism that they could have done it. It was clunky and complicated, and it's too long to get into right now. They've adjusted that somewhat to allow for warrants or protective custody now,
Mhm.
uh, as a result of the shooting. But uh, you know, it required manpower, a lot of time and effort that, some of these small departments don't necessarily have that. But when they use that excuse, the response is, well, what are you doing better with your time than that? You don't have the time to fill out the paperwork for that, and it's clunky, and it's difficult. But what better things do you have to do than a case like this is screaming out for intervention? I mean, this guy clearly needed the help by that point. He was far gone. He and after speaking with his friend, and he told me some of the circumstances. By this time, he was actually literally training and practicing, doing dry runs on what he set out to do: the bowling alley to the to the sports bar, and then eventually to the boat launch where he parked his car, and then eventually to his former employers where they found his body in the trailer. Where I told you I would circle back to that, but
Mhm.
he clearly went there to kill all those employees. The Maine State Police should never acknowledge that. They they should have known he was there. They that's another thing. I hate to be dumping on the cops, but I'm sorry. You know, they missed that. They missed that big time. Um, I
Well,
walked that. I walked that route from where he parked his car to the recycling plant where they found his body, and there's a trail that runs right along the river that through the woods that goes right to the very back of that facility. You have to hop a 5 foot chain link fence, and you're in there. So he parked his car there for a reason.
weren't they even tipped off by his brother at one
Yeah,
point?
his brother told him, and also his best friend told the police hours after the shooting. When they said, "Where do you think he went?" They said, "Maine Recycling." I don't, they haven't acknowledged this at all publicly. I could not ignore this in the book. Obviously, that it once again, full respect to the law enforcement for the difficulty of the manhunts and the scale of the crime. But there were 800 law enforcement officers tromping all over the region with helicopters and tactical vehicles and heavy SWAT teams. And he was a mile down the road in a trailer for 46 hours with another semi-automatic and 200 rounds of ammunition, waiting to kill his former employee. And nobody bothered to follow the breadcrumbs from where he parked his car along the trail to exactly where they found his body 46 hours later. So that was an egregious oversight.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah,
Um, let's backtrack a little bit here.
sure.
There's I want to circle back to the actual beginning of this mass shooting and how he picked his targets at the beginning, and then I want to focus a little bit on the victims before we leave everybody here today.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit and talk a little bit about the victims because they're really the ones who are the tragic part of this whole thing here, Robert.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh, how does he decide on Schemengees? How does he decide on the sports bar, and how does he decide it to me to all of us it seems random, but this was very calculated. The fact that he picked
Yeah.
these
Mm-hmm.
spots, I mean, of course Maine Recycling because that's where he worked and that's where he believed he was being accused. Why
Mm-hmm.
why Schemengees?
Well, he went to the bowling alley first. He had bowled there, and as you mentioned, there was the incident with that young girl in the bowling alley. That could have been that could have been the pivot point where he decided, okay, this is where he was so angry at that incident. But there were um, he had been there a number of times. He bowled there a number of times, so clearly he had decided, somewhere that these people were saying terrible things about him, and he targeted that place without a doubt. He left his house and drove straight to the bowling alley. Um, you know, fully intending to do as his friend who was the Army Reserve sergeant with him said. Listen, we trained They trained us like this: you plan, you train, and you execute. He planned it, and he trained on it. And he went to a gun range the night before, the day before the shooting. I didn't find that out until later when the Maine State Police released 3,000 pages of mostly redacted, but there was some things in there. So he trained and then he executed. He had a plan and he followed it. And that, so that's the part that you can sympathize with somebody who's got traumatic brain injury, but it's hard to separate that from a very calculated, cold, sort of plotted, executed plan like that. It's,
It, it just
and, and
it's
then he went to the sports bar for the same reason. He had gone there and played cornhole on a number of there's cornhole leagues they have there, and on a number of occasions, some people recognized him. They didn't really know him well, but they recognized him as somebody who had been there before. And
what
he had a girlfriend he used to go there with. He met a woman there. Um, so that was the second place he decided they were talking about him.
one of the people at Schemengees at the sports bar that he actually drew down on was one of the people he actually played with.
Yeah, yeah. He was a former. He worked at Bath Iron Works, the shipbuilding. Um, Former Navy guy. Yeah, he recognized him. He said they had played together, and in fact, he Card had recommended to this guy to go to Schemengees to play cornhole because they had played somewhere else before together. So yeah. Once again, it's a small state. There's not a lot of people. There's 6 degrees of separation everywhere. Yeah.
I mean, there's and I know you didn't cite it in the book, but there's some wonderful work that's being done by Chris Nowinski, who's a former WWE wrestler. He's now a neurologist. He's part of the CTE Foundation in Boston. That he's really the straw that stirs the drink when it comes to a lot of the work on CTE. And,
Mm-hmm.
and probably where Robert Card's brain went when they did a lot of the testing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's amazing the stuff they're doing now. One of the tests that they're doing now, they're actually doing while athletes are alive, athletes and military men while they're alive. A lot of the concussion grenade stuff that you're talking about, they're
Mm-hmm.
actually pulling men from the field and doing a blood test and administering it to them while
Oh
they're
yeah,
alive to
yeah,
find the
yeah.
protein.
Mm-hmm. I read about that. Yeah, it's a protein. Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
trying to diagnose why they're still alive if they're going to go through CTE, which is absolutely horrifying,
yeah.
but at least now you have a fighting chance to know if
Yeah,
that's something that you can.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's I haven't mentioned the Card family. Extraordinary people, really. I just have the utmost respect for their courage, and they obviously were very traumatized. Felt a tremendous amount of guilt and I'm sure still do remorse, and they tried so hard to get some help for him. They really did. He was not a man who was abandoned by family or friends.
Right.
People were trying. And that's what makes it especially, sad is that people were really trying to get him some help, and yet still they were unable to do so. But they were relieved to find out that there was at least some kind of a root cause that was not just a selfish, horrible decision that he made, but the brain damage, his service as a soldier, the fact that this is probably going to lead to some changes in training for military members, and that there's a correlation between his death and the study and the future of helping soldiers with TBI. That's some solace to the family, and I was happy for them that they got some solace and in full recognition, of course, that the worst is the families of the victims, and I spoke to a couple of them, and it's really sad and tragic, and there were too many young kids that were left behind, and um, it's just it was just a horrible night. It really was.
Yes, indeed. That's what makes us story even more difficult is the fact that you realize that with Robert Card II, there were extenuating circumstances, and that he probably was not in full control of his faculties when this happened. Um, and you and not only that, but that the Card family has reached out to the community time in and time out to not only apologize for what happened, but they've done so with hat in hand and tried to heal with the community, which is so. I mean, just so above and beyond. At first, they were silent because they wanted to grieve with the community. Then they reached out to the community, and there's just so much that they've done to. Again, so above and beyond. I've not seen that from any other. I
Yeah.
say any other shooter's family. Does that make sense, Robert?
Yeah, I think there's been a couple of I know the Columbine shooter, the mother, Dylan
Yeah,
Klebold's
yeah,
mother was, yeah. But I certainly, there's not, I have such, like I said, such tremendous admiration for the strength that it took them to. They testified at a public hearing. It was just very emotional, very tough. Speaking with them, it's clear the pain will not go away anytime soon. And
right.
also the respect they had for the community. They recognize that these victims are, the worst is all these families that are left behind, and so there wasn't one shred of inauthenticity about their response, which once again, I just take my hat off to them for having that kind of courage.
Yeah, yeah,
They're paying the price. I know some of them are really still. I know his brother is in rough shape. His brother was a 100% disabled vet, 4 combat tours with the 75th Rangers. He's having a tough time. I know that. He was having a tough time before, but I think he was very close to his brother, and I think feels a lot of guilt also. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the other victims here, and then I want to wrap it up a
Mhm.
little bit here with what changes Maine has made, which is interesting. Um,
Mhm.
we talked a little bit about Jason Walker and Michael. Is it Delorier?
Delorier, yeah,
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 and the fact that they were best friends, they tried to stop Robert Card at Schemengees, and were unsuccessful. They tried to do so with their bare hands. One of the stories that really touched me had to do with a husband and wife that um, they were bowling instructors for the youth league. Both
hmm,
were 76 years old, I believe, and
yeah,
they
yeah.
both lost their lives. Although they had lived long lives, they what happened after I believe the bowling alley has reopened now.
It has. It's amazing. Yeah, they opened up, renovated completely, and they did. I talked to the owners and sat down with them while they were renovating, and they said that the Violets, the older couple that you were mentioning, they considered not opening, after the incident, and then they would think about Robert Violet. He would be rolling in his grave and telling them, "You better open this place up again. These kids need this." Um, so they, I'm sorry, that makes me.
No, it's okay. It's
Yeah,
a story.
um, quite a couple, an amazing couple. There's actually been a foundation that was started in their honor, the Violet Bob and Lucy Violet Bowling Fund, to scholarships to offer bowling. Offer what they were with the kids all the time. They were always there helping these kids. They shielded the kids when they died.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
That's absolutely amazing. I mean, it just an amazing couple who deserve to be remembered for all time. And
yeah,
and the
yeah.
owners of the bowling alley, the Just-in-Time bowling alley, put up a
Mhm.
memorial for all 18 victims.
They did. Yeah, they put up. They had bowling pins with their names. All 18 of the victims. There were 8 killed at the bowling alley and 10 at Schemengees. Obviously, they put up a memorial for everybody. And there'll be memorials, public memorials later in Lewiston. But it was nice, and the renovation, they got a lot of help and support. The community was overjoyed that they reopened, so that was a good thing.
Yeah.
Schemengees is not. Schemengees is still closed and probably will never reopen.
There's one interesting profile in the book that still kind of gets me. That's Artie Strout's father, who
Yeah.
has not only wrote a song about his son, but he's in an interesting place when it comes to gun control. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. He's Arthur Bernard. He just tells it like it is. This guy doesn't spare a word. He just comes right out and bada boom. You know, he was not interested in gun control at all. Doesn't own weapons. He was a convicted felon, is a convicted felon. He sold some coke to a friend of his way back when he was 18 or 19, and who was an informant, as it turns out. So never owned a gun. And so I didn't really care much about him, and didn't think twice about somebody, sending on weapons. He is now an ardent gun control advocate, calling for a national registry, speaking where he never spoke in public before. Getting up at the State House. He'll be on the Frontline PBS Frontline special on October 25th, the first year anniversary. He's featured in that documentary, as is his song that he wrote. He's a musician.
Mhm.
He was actually playing pool with his son Artie, and he left 10 minutes before Robert Card walked in. And he provided me with a photo that's in the book of a photo that his son took of him uh, on his phone playing pool at that table just a few minutes before. And then when they recovered his phone, he found the photo. So it was, they were very close, and the fact that he was 10 minutes away, I talk about that. Of course, it's just a matter of luck. Where are you? Somebody came that wasn't supposed to be there, but they were texted to come and replace somebody else in a pool league. And these stories it's just a matter of the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a tragic story at that. I mean, the guilt that a father must have to know that he lost his son, and it's just a matter of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and with that, I want people to read the book to get the other profiles of the other victims. These are stories that will break your heart, folks. They really will. Each
Well,
and
thank you for pointing that out, because that's often lost, I think, in these cases. I tried to never forget that, writing a book, that, and it did feel intrusive, and there were times when I questioned whether I should keep going with it, but it just felt like it needed to be said, and ultimately, the 18, 18 families or more, that's really
yeah,
what matters the most.
it is, and that's what you're right. You're right, Robert. That's what they are. What matters the most out of everything in this book.
Mhm.
The 18 victims, the 18 families are the ones that matter the most out of everything here in Lewiston, and deserve to be memorialized the most for all time.
Mhm.
The other thing that deserves to be talked about is where we go from here, because in Maine, they've actually made a bit of an adjustment to try to do something to prevent this again. Now, there's a red card law that we know about nationally. There's a yellow card law in Maine. To kind of summarize it briefly, the yellow card law takes and tries to fill the gap where the red card law is, let's just say, wanting. That's the best way to put it. But they added something to the yellow card law that the governor had not done previously after Robert Card had gone on his shooting spree. Can you explain to
Yeah.
people what it is they added?
Yes. The yellow card law is actually sort of a watered down version of the red card. The red card allows family members to petition a judge to remove the weapons without the first consultation with a mental health professional. And it's 20 states, I think, in the country have some variation of that along that line. The yellow card was Maine's attempt to not quite go that far, because there was quite a bit of an objection to any kind of law that would. It's an ex parte hearing, which means that only the judge and the petitioner. But the yellow card law requires a mental health professional to make a diagnosis before weapons can be removed. What they did with this law was just essentially I don't want to say tweaked it because they allowed for a warrant to enter a home to take somebody into protective custody, um, and that wasn't available to the sheriff when he went there that one time. I don't know if they would have used it because they knew he was heavily armed and paranoid, so they might not have gone in anyway. But that was even then, even that small little step was fought vigorously in the state house.
Yeah.
It's a democratically controlled state house, and but there was a party line objection to that, more or less. They also passed a couple of others, the 72-hour waiting period
Mm-hmm.
for advertised gun sales. So at gun shows and uh, print advertisements,
Mm-hmm.
that's being contested and is going to court. The governor signed that, but whether it's actually implemented anytime soon without being halted at some level in the courts remains to be seen. Um, Aside from that, that's more or less it. There were many others that were presented that didn't clear the hurdle, and there's probably going to be some coming around again in the next session. It's a part-time legislature, so they're off during the summer, but I suspect in September there'll be some new attempts. Um, the reaction initially was very strong. Let's change this and change that. But it was predictable. The reaction to the legislation was pretty strong as well. So
You make a very eloquent and very detailed point of pointing out that gun shows don't necessarily produce the guns that end up in mass shootings. It's online forums that have produced a lot, including the one that Robert Card produced, the AR-15, the Bushmaster that he used in the shooting in Lewiston, came from an
well,
online.
he actually bought that in the gun store, so that was illegal.
He did. Okay.
Yeah, he bought that in the gun store. But there have been cases here in the state where guns were flagged, and it was a mass shooting in Nova Scotia where the guns came from a gun show in Maine. Um, and there's straw man sales where people are buying guns on behalf of gangs and other things. So the loopholes are so wide. You could just it doesn't take much to. I mean, somebody could prior you could see a advertised sale in Uncle Henry's, a little swap and sale guide that's popular in the state, and you could call somebody up and say, "I'll meet you down at the parking lot down the supermarket," and exchange the gun, and no background check or um, you know, those loopholes are still they still exist. It was closed a little bit, but if you want to get a gun, you can get a gun.
Oh, sure.
It's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's for sure.
And so I don't know how much unless there's an outright ban or a national registry. Arthur Bernard, for example, he wants a national registry and an outright assault weapon ban. Um, I think unless something like that happens, the loopholes are always going to be there to be exploited. So
How do you feel? And this is just a personal question, and you can choose to pass on it if you wish, Robert, but how do you feel personally about the argument on one side of gun owners and the NRA of, well, if you do something like that, or a national registry, and you take and make that loophole for regular citizens, that the criminals win, that they're going to always be able to get a hold of guns, but if you handcuff regular citizens, well, they've won.
it's such a it's no matter how you frame it, it's just a very, very difficult, given our proclivity for possessing firearms in this country. It's a very difficult thing to overcome. I I don't have any objection to guns at all.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, I think assault weapons that are semi-automatic weapons are there's no place in our society for them. I don't see the need. I just don't. I look at it strictly from a when they wrote the framers of the Constitution, we're not thinking about 700 rounds a minute when they wrote it, right? So
Very true. It didn't
Springfield,
exist.
Springfield rifles, you could fire two in a minute if you were really good at packing the musket. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I I don't see the need for it. I also recognize once it's established, it's really hard to get rid of something. So yeah, I let other people fight that fight. I try not to get too much into it in the book just because
Yeah.
I thought it would just, get too diluted. But, something has to be done. I mean, we're talking about this, and I think that's how I ended the book.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Lewiston is another graveyard marker in mass shootings, and there's going to be another one. We'll move on to another one. And I don't know why, and especially school shootings. Something needs to be done.
So in closing, and this might be a little bit of a wide open close, but in closing, when it comes to the mental health issue, whose doorstep do you put it on? Where does the line end? Is it up to a combination of law enforcement and the family? Is it a combination of the government and family? What combination does it end up, and whose doorstep does it end up on in order for there to be a proper solution?
Wow, my goodness. I really do not know how to answer that. I can only say that, the response from law enforcement when they were looking for Robert Card was overwhelming, and the resources available to law enforcement are overwhelming. We have a knee-jerk reaction in this country to just react in such a huge, overpowerful way to the incidents themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to trying to prevent the incidents, we seem to not dedicate. We fall far short of the resources that are needed.
Yeah.
Besides a 2-hour training for cops or three, whatever.
Right.
There's such an overwhelming need. It's and I think we need to dedicate more resources to trying to prevent it. However that may be. I'm not an expert by any means, so I don't know, but let's try to prevent it. Then we don't have to react to it.
Very,
So,
very true. Yeah,
yeah.
there definitely needs to be more resources put into how exactly we do it. And there needs to be more teamwork into how we do it. I don't think it's just one solution. I don't
Yes.
you just
Yeah. One of the other things that really, really was disheartening to me was the territorial, the 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 failure of law enforcement to talk to each other, or the failure of the army and law enforcement to come up with a plan because it's their job or it's their territory. I can't tell them what I think because they might get mad at me. It's like the CIA and the FBI not talking about what they knew about 9/11.
right.
With this territorial, the marking and pissing on territory to claim it as your own at the risk of public safety is just it's happened too often. It needs to stop.
Right.
So,
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The book, folks, is The Lewiston Shootings, an All-American Tragedy. It's a wonderful book. Very detailed look at what happened in that incident in 2023. Robert Conlin, again, my hat's off to you as far as this wonderful book that's out there. I encourage people to go get it. We have a link in the description of this program. Robert Conlin, I want to thank you so much for being on True Crime Tuesday.
Tim, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Folks, it's time now for us to lighten things up a bit. It's time now to bring in Jessicafreeburg, and it's time for Dumb Crimes and Stupid Criminals.
It's Crayon News story time.
What happened with this dude, Christ Bearer? I heard he cut his penis off and then jumped off a balcony.
Suspect pulls gun from butt, shoots twice at Denver police.
What is your emergency?
I need help.
And what's the problem?
I'm too high.
You're too high?
Yeah.
It's that time. The time you've all been looking forward to. It's time now for Dumb Crimes and Stupid Criminals. And with that, we bring in a co-hostess. I'm not about to surprise you at all. She's right over there. She's lovely. She's talented. She's got a brain much bigger than mine, even though you can see mine a little better because I don't have any hair obstructing mine. See, it's a chrome dome if you're into that sort of thing, especially if you're watching on video. I know we've added the video thing for those of you who don't know. But right over there she is, Jessicafreeburg. Hi, Jess.
Hey, I feel like I should shave my head so we can have matching chrome dome.
No, you don't have to. No, please don't feel peer pressure to do that sort of thing. You don't have to. No, you're lovely as you are. I wish I could grow hair. I haven't done that in about 30 years or so.
I got some in a bag. We could just like glue it on your head.
I could go get a wig if you'd like. We don't have
Yeah.
have to get extreme. Actually, I did have the there's the hair club for men. I had the Apollo hair system at one time.
Did you? Did it work?
I look pretty good with the Apollo hair system.
Did you?
A certain someone I won't mention because I don't want him to break out the photos. Looked like he had a drowned rat on his head. I actually looked like Richard Marx. I had the it was very yeah,
Ooh,
it was a bouffon.
very nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I even had the long sweeping hair in the back and it was a little curly and it's pretty good for 1990. But yeah, I don't know. I I took good care of it. But then
Yeah.
something happened. I was allergic to the glue because you know what they do is they shave the crown. I know this is really boring in case you're looking for dumb crimes, stupid criminals, but it was a crime how much they took off me, Jess. That's how it ties a lot of money for those things.
Yeah.
Basically shave the crown of your head right here, and then they glue that piece right there, and then they have you grow a little strip of hair right here. Where I wish I could grow hair now. And then
Okay, that's wild.
and then they blend it in with the piece so that you can't tell that they've glued the tube as it is right here in the front of the head. I'm showing people on video, but in audio, you'll have to imagine where your hairline is right here. They have you grow a little strip of hair in the front of your hairline so that you can blend it in with the toupee.
Huh,
Yeah.
interesting.
The only problem is that that glue, although they claim it's non-toxic, I have very sensitive skin and I just broke out in the biggest rash.
Oh, well, it's not worth it. You look great just the way you are.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. So now it's cue ball Timmy. There's no we shave this stuff down and we're happy with it. So I don't know who we is, but we're not France, but I don't know. So that's how it goes. So I'm happy the way I am. I don't need you know, my mother's father was as bald as I am, and so is I.
That's right. Just embrace it.
Yeah, that's all you can do. You go with what God gave you, and that's and what genetics hands down, and that's what you do. So with that, we talk about people who go with what God gave them, which isn't a whole lot of brains. We talk about dumb crimes and stupid criminals today. We're starting with the ultimate crime, Jess. The ultimate crime today of people who just can't stand it when little kids is making money.
Hmm.
Do you remember a couple of years ago when an innocent kid got out there and started making money at a lemonade stand?
Well, sure. My kids have done that before.
Do you remember the people who called the cops on the little kid with the lemonade stand?
No, I don't remember that.
You
I
don't
mean,
remember
maybe
that
a
story?
little, like now that you're saying it, though, it's kind of coming back to me.
And it was such an outrage that they tried to call the cops on this little kid who probably didn't have proper tax papers. And the kid was just trying to raise money to go to Disney World or Disneyland. I don't remember which one it was.
They didn't have like an EIN or anything.
Yeah, no tax number or anything. And it was such an outrage to people that they lined up for blocks to buy lemonade from this kid just to shove it up the ass of
Oh,
the person who called the cops on him. Even the cops lined up and bought lemonade from the kid because they thought it was so
that's
ridiculous.
amazing.
It's a great story. Well, we have a repeat offender, Jess. It turns out that Children's Lemonade Stand was set up, and some homeowners association members tried to shut it down by calling the sheriff's office.
Oh, come on.
We call these grade A pricks where I'm from. We're going to Colorado, Jess. We're in Summit County. Homeowners association members in Colorado tried to shut down a children's lemonade stand by calling the sheriff's office. Pricks. Why? I mean,
Seriously.
you try to teach kids a little bit about business, right? You say, hey, you know what? If you be a go-getter, go out there, set up a lemonade stand, make a little money, go hustle. You got a little extra pocket change, you go buy some candy, do whatever you want with it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Wildernest Homeowners Association members called the Summit County Sheriff's Office complaining about children running an illegal lemonade stand. I'll kiss my ass. The caller said the kids were blocking the road.
Oh, gosh.
Can you believe it?
Some people.
Right? What, you couldn't stop and say, excuse me, kids, could you just maybe move the stand a little bit? It really, you had to call the cops, big guy, big shot. However, when deputies arrived, they found that the children were not blocking the roadway, but did ask them to move back from the road for their safety. So good on the cops, right?
Yes.
Thinking the matter settled, deputies started to move out. But the asshole homeowners came out and began yelling at the children, claiming they were on private property. So the deputies then came back.
I hope they arrested the homeowners.
Let's hope they did. The deputies again found no issue with where the kids were selling the lemonade. Deputies determined that the property was shared homeowners association property. And because the children's parents are part of the homeowners association, they had a right to be there. I wish they would have arrested these people for filing a false report, but they didn't. Why not, Jess? Why not?
Why not? Indeed, they totally should have. What a waste of the police officer's time.
I don't know. I do have some interesting stories here about when good guys go wrong. You ready for this?
Really?
Yeah, I got a couple of interesting ones. They're harmless enough. I don't know that they're harmless enough. They have to do with alcohol.
No.
It's the summertime, we all, maybe have a few, kick back, have a few in the, on the back porch. In your case, on the back porch. With me, maybe it's on the front porch. If I want to go into a coma and fall asleep and let the chipmunks draw Sharpie dicks on my forehead. I don't know. Maybe that's a thing. I can't say I've woke up with Sharpie dicks on my forehead from the chipmunks, but it may happen. You never know. We go to Petersburg, Virginia, where a Virginia firefighter is on administrative leave following a crash involving a fire engine he was driving in a parked car. Here is the alarming thing, Jess. That firefighter, by the way, said he was struggling. He crashed his fire engine and admitted to drinking 18 beers before his shift.
What?
Just a little drinky poo before the shift. Just a tiny little drinky poo. He was a little parched. They fight fires, Jess.
Yeah.
Those fires are hot.
Well, I think alcohol is combustible, right? Though, like that's not a good idea.
Well, it's not combustible in your belly. But, firefighters get hot. You need a little something to drink. The reported collision occurred Tuesday afternoon when a fire engine being driven by 34-year-old Petersburg firefighter Aaron Michael Hinspader, crashed into a parked car near the intersection of Sycamore and Bank Streets. According to court documents, 34-year-old Aaron Michael Hinspader was given a test for alcohol content in his system following the crash, and it came back at 0.145, nearly double the 0.08 legal limit. That's a little bit, yeah. Authorities reported the Petersburg firefighter admitted to drinking 18 beers prior to his shift that day. Now, one or two.
Yeah, maybe even 8.
Maybe even 8.
19 put him double over. Maybe if he'd have just stuck with 8, he would have been under the legal limit at least.
You have a hell of a tolerance if you can knock back 9 before your shift and be under the legal limit. I'm just saying.
No kidding. I couldn't even have 2. I'd be under the table.
WWBT reports that a witness who works nearby said they saw Hinspader getting a sobriety test after the collision. He was struggling through it, the man said. They were doing the same thing over and over again because he couldn't pass the first thing. Not good. According to police, no one was in the parked car and no injuries were reported. Thank God. Authorities said Hinspader is facing a charge of driving while intoxicated. According to the city of Petersburg, Hinspader has been placed on administrative leave while the investigation continues. Now, this got me thinking. There was a story about a month ago that I didn't report on because we had so much going on at the end of June that I thought, well, this is pretty mundane, although it relates to this last story. And that is where you have one that's pretty impressive, you can always find another one that'll top it, right?
Yeah.
We, of course, go to Florida, where a Florida deputy is accused of showing up to work after drinking coffee mugs of whiskey.
Whoa.
That's impressive. 27-year-old Joseph Everett faces charges of DUI in Polk County, Florida, after admitting, he drinks coffee mugs of whiskey in his squad.
Oh, not even like Irish coffee, not just a little like
it's not
hair of the dog in your coffee, just straight up.
That's
whiskey.
Just it's more than hair of dog. It's a whole damn dog in your coffee cup. A Polk County deputy was arrested after showing up to work last month with signs of being intoxicated, that according to the sheriff's office. In a release, the sheriff's office announced that the deputy, identified as 27-year-old Joseph Everett, had the smell of alcohol on his breath. I bet he did. It was probably coming out of his pores, which led his supervisor to believe that Everett was drunk. He was more than drunk. I think he was a walking liquor cabinet. Everett admitted to drinking around 3 mugs of coffee. I'm sorry, 3 coffee mugs of whiskey. See, he got me intoxicated just reading it. It was so
now we're all drunk.
That's right. Everett admitted to drinking around 3 coffee mugs of whiskey the night prior, and a sobriety test indicated he was impaired, according to the release. Anytime someone chooses to drive under the influence of alcohol, it shows a lack of good judgment, Sheriff Grady Judd said. If you lack the proper judgment when it comes to drinking and driving, you have no business working in law enforcement. We hold our deputies to a higher standard than the community, and he failed to meet that standard. Now Everett faces a charge of DUI. Well, Everett cooperated with the investigation. He ultimately resigned upon his arrest. According to the release, he had worked with the sheriff's office for only 2 years.
Wow, that's a lot of whiskey. I'm just thinking like a shot glass, and then here's my mug.
Right.
You don't know what's in here, but I'm telling you, it's not whiskey.
Okay, good. Well, that's good. Yeah. That's good that your tea told me today.
That's a lot of shots that could fit in there. That's crazy.
Well, you figure there's probably in an 8, I don't know if an 8-ounce shot is good, but 4 ounces is a shot, right? I think 4 ounces of whiskey is a shot.
I'm not sure. That sounds like a lot, but
I think 4 ounces or 2 ounces.
I feel like 2. Now I want to Google it.
You can go ahead and Google. I'm gonna assume a tall shot is 4 ounces. Okay.
Okay.
So if a tall shot is 4 ounces, then you're talking 5 shots in a 20-ounce mug. But a 2 ounce.
Yeah. Okay. 1.5 fluid ounces is a shot.
Oh my God. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So in an 11-ounce mug or 12-ounce mug, that's more than 6.
That's a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So if you drank 3 mugs, that's 18 shots of whiskey.
No.
How are you upright?
It would not be.
He had to have just drank until he passed out.
I mean, I would definitely be drooling on myself and sleeping.
It's not a good look. Speaking of not a good look, Jess, our next story has to do with things you bring to the airport for $500, Alex.
All right.
Right. Now, when you travel or when you're planning a trip, things you put in your bag, things that are absolute necessities for you, Jess, just give me an idea of give me 5 things, 5 things you absolutely need to travel with.
Well, I need something to read or listen to. So if I'm going to read, it's a book. If I'm listening to it, I got to make sure I have my phone. I have accidentally taken a knife to the airport.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple of times. Actually, this keeps happening to me because I love to eat apples,
A couple
but I don't like to eat them like an animal. I like to cut them into slices. So I always have a knife in my backpack.
Okay, that could be a problem. Okay.
It's not a necessity though. I don't try to take those. They keep taking them from me and they're really nice knives, but
Okay.
yeah. Reading material, listening to something, maybe a blanket for the airplane and some gum because I get a little motion sick. So like mint gum helps with that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good list. I thank you for throwing the knife in there. That's somewhat appropriate for this story. One woman in Pittsburgh decided there's one thing she absolutely couldn't do without going to the airport. Evidently, that was bringing her gun onto the airplane.
Oh,
Because you never knew when you have those unruly passengers that need to be
yeah.
in their place. Because nothing says stop crying, baby, like a gun. I'm just saying. A West Virginia woman, figures it was West Virginia. I'm just kidding. I don't know what that means. West Virginia woman has been charged with allegedly bringing a gun to a security checkpoint at Pittsburgh International Airport on Sunday. The Allegheny County Police Department said in a statement that 33-year-old Amber Brooks, who seems like she's really young to be toting, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brought a revolver in her backpack. Of all the places to carry a gun, your backpack. I mean, that's not really accessible or quick to draw, you know?
No, not really. Have to have in a little holster.
Yeah. Transportation Secretary Administration officials called Allegheny County Police, who determined that Brooks did not have a concealed carry permit. So probably not a good idea to put that in there because that's a little extra on the felony, you know? Yeah. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was also notified at the time. Brooks has been charged with carrying a firearm without a license. County police reminded passengers going through Pittsburgh International that that people who bring guns to the airport checkpoint face fines of up to $10,000. So don't do it unless you got 10 grand hanging. Dozens of guns and even grenades have been found at the checkpoint so far this year there in Pittsburgh. Who flies with a grenade?
You don't need that to cut apples.
Although that would be fun to cut an apple with a grenade or even a gun. Just saying.
Yeah.
Set the apple up and pew. I mean, it's an interesting cut. I've never had a bullet cut apple before. I'd be willing to try it. Just saying. Yeah. Here's the other thing, folks. If you don't have a license to carry your firearm, probably don't bring one to the airport. Just saying. It's probably a good idea. Even if you have
probably don't bring one, even if you do, though.
Well, there's some people now, as far as I know, I don't know the exact rules and regs, so don't quote me. The only people who have reciprocity to bring between states are law enforcement officers.
Right.
So there are some people that do carry their guns on flights, but
yeah,
they're checked properly.
Yeah, that's the exception.
And they present their proper identification. But other than that, you're not going to see too many people bringing their armaments on flights.
I hope not.
Just doesn't happen. This next story, Jess, I had to go all the way to Atlanta Black Star to get. Because I got street cred like that. Just saying. I don't know what that means. Do you happen to read Atlanta Black Star?
I don't.
No? It's good.
Is it a good one?
Oh, yeah. Lots of juicy gossip on Atlanta Black Star. Just saying. Some of the videos are pretty entertaining.
Are they? I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I'll send you a link.
Okay.
Anywho, this next story is pretty entertaining because there's some things I don't know what you've taught your teenagers as far as when they get in certain sticky situations, what they should do. Have you had certain talks with them as far as,
Well, I mean, what kind of sticky situations? You mean like being at a party and the cops show up, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that type of deal.
Yeah. Well, from my personal experience growing up in Iowa, it was always run for the corn.
Run for the corn. But there's children in them their corn.
I know. It's even scarier.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my kids are perfect, so they don't do anything like that, Tim. So
yeah.
Yeah,
so
no.
Never had to use it. Yeah. Get that. Yeah.
I do tell my kids though, call me. Just call me. I'll come get you.
And you've never gotten that call, surprisingly, right?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, because they're perfect.
Now that in like there's Uber now, so nobody needs to call their moms.
There's Uber. Well, that and they call their dad.
Definitely seen some Uber charges that were very late at night for my son in college. And I'm like, oh, that's good for him.
Yeah, good. He's learned.
Usually followed by like an order from, is it Uber Eats or whoever delivers your food, your extra expensive McDonald's because you had it delivered.
DoorDash. Oh.
Yeah, DoorDash. That's the one I was looking for.
DoorDash will save your life. Just saying.
It is.
Yeah. Well, this story from Atlanta Black Star, evidently this teen girl did not learn properly. Just saying. Because
what'd she do?
Well, some chaos erupted in court as a teen girl accused of murder. There's the first thing she did.
Whoa.
Yep. She then sucker punched a U.S. Marshal during a hearing on a fatal beating of a disabled man. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
What?
We got a little bit of a trifecta. We got to take apart some things, and then we end up getting our story. So here we go.
Oh, man.
As I said, Atlanta Black Star has the best stories ever. A Washington, D.C. courtroom erupted after a teenage girl charged in connection with the fatal beating of a 64-year-old disabled man last year attacked a deputy U.S. Marshal during pretrial proceedings. Unpack that one, my friend.
I mean, she just sounds like a sweetheart. I just want to hire her to babysit.
No, you don't. During the July 19th hearing, the 13-year-old defendant allegedly sucker punched the officer, leading to her arrest and removal on a stretcher. She knew how to throw a punch. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
She's 13?
13.
Dang.
Some kids just know they got that street smart. Yeah.
When she gets out of prison, they need to sign her up for like MMA fighting or something.
I think she's going to make the prison boxing league. I'm just saying. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Officials did not disclose further details about the violent incident. Moments before the commotion, prosecutors accused the girl and two underage co-defendants of taking selfies after filming the attack that killed Reggie Brown on October 17th of 2023.
Oh, that is so disturbing.
Yeah. So she was younger than that and taking selfies over the defendant's body. Brown, a frail man with physical disabilities who lived in Northwest D.C., was beaten to death, allegedly by a group of young girls who chased him into an alley where he was beaten mercilessly. She's a real stand-up gal.
Yeah, I don't like that.
No. Before hitting the ground, Brown tried to escape by climbing a chain-link fence, but his attackers pulled him down and stomped his head into the pavement until he stopped moving. Probably not a Girl Scout. Just saying. If that wasn't enough, the suspects also pulled the man's pants down around his ankles, removing his belt and beating him with it.
Yikes.
Again, not going to win any badges at Girl Scouts. The girls, barely old enough to be out alone, allegedly sauntered off into the night and celebrated themselves, leaving Brown in a pool of his own blood. Later, officers responded to the 6200 block of Georgia Avenue, where they found Brown suffering from multiple blunt force injuries. He died at the scene. Following an investigation, police arrested 3 girls, all between the ages of 12 and 13. During a court hearing in late March, police officials played the video of the vicious attack, showing a man in a blue coat initially throwing Brown to the pavement before the other assailants pounced. The 12-year-old recorded the beating on her cell phone, according to authorities. One of the young suspects told police that 2 of them did not want to take part in the flogging, but was forced to after the unidentified man threatened to shoot them with a gun that he flashed on his waist. But police have never confirmed whether Brown had a weapon. Officials said previously that Brown was afflicted by severe health issues, including a metal plate in his head and only 2 fingers on each hand, rendering him powerless to defend himself.
Oh, man.
Yeah. One of the 13-year-old suspects was taken into custody on March 28th, while a second 13-year-old and a 12-year-old were apprehended the next day. None of the suspects had a criminal record at the time of Brown's death. The suspects have not been identified by authorities because they are underage. However, both 13-year-olds were formally charged with second-degree murder during their initial hearing on March 29th, although they have not been charged as adults. Now, the 12-year-old girl faces charges after she was shot in the leg in an unrelated incident at her home in late March before she was arrested. The injury she sustained was not life-threatening. In another twist, all three girls lived in the same suburb of Northwest D.C. as the victim, but there was no indication that they ever crossed paths before the night that Brown was slain. On the night of Brown's death, detectives came upon a man's lifeless body in the middle of the night on Georgia Avenue. An autopsy later determined Brown died as a result of a homicide, but no suspects emerged immediately, despite video surveillance of the attack, which showed three girls kicking and stomping the defenseless man before walking away nonchalantly. The two 13-year-old girls were remanded to a secure youth facility, while the 12-year-old girl was set to appear before the judge the day after she was wounded in a separate shooting. Investigators said Brown's attackers didn't know him, leaving relatives struggling to make sense of the violence that claimed his life. My uncle really didn't deserve this, Brown's niece told News 4 in Washington earlier this year. He was known in the community for years, so for this to happen where he lived for 64 years is insane. They have to be held accountable. Family members said Brown was a compassionate man who cared deeply about others and was always willing to help, even going so far as to give someone the shirt off of his back. He was just a quiet, nice, polite person. He didn't bother anybody. That's the type of person he was, said a close family friend who told that to Fox 5 in Washington. 13 years old, winding up on
a rough one.
Yeah. There you go. Punched a U.S. Marshal during her hearing.
It started out funny, and then it ended really sad.
Yeah, we'll bring it back to this. Yeah, okay. I know it's just, but it is dumb crime, stupid criminal. And
it is. They're doing bad things.
Yeah,
be prepared for it.
She's the stupidest of them all, and she's not getting any better. And she's only 12.
No.
Well, 13 now, but
she's just starting out. Maybe they can rehabilitate her.
At that young of an age, going to juvie, I don't know that there's much hope.
Yeah, doing something that awful. I mean, that is vicious.
Yeah, that is.
It's crazy.
That is. We are moving on here. Let's see here. A would-be bride is busted over prenup battery. Now, we're not talking about the little battery that sits on your shoulder and it's like, knock it off, it's a chip on my shoulder type battery, right? This has to do with a woman days before her wedding being jailed. She's only 26 years old. In fact, I have a picture of her here, Jess. This is the jailbird in question right there.
All right.
That's the somewhat lovely bride. I say
looks a little angry, but
a little angry. She looks like she doesn't want to be married. A couple is said to be married this weekend, and they got into an argument over signing a prenuptial agreement that turned violent and resulted in the would-be bride's arrest for domestic battery. I don't know. Do you think prenups are that controversial that you'd beat the heck out of hubby or hubby to be?
No, just sign it and move on.
Yeah. Investigators allege that 26-year-old Molly Rose Hogan, it's the Irish Rose in her that got her ire up, and the male victim were engaged in a prenuptials quarrel late on Sunday night in their St. Petersburg, Florida residence. Oh, yes, we're going to Florida, kids. The victim told cops that Hogan grabbed him around the head and struck him on the chest, torso, back, and legs, causing multiple physical injuries. Well, her last name is Hogan. She is a wrestler after all, I guess, right?
She's the Hulk.
That's right. Old Hulk Hogan there. The attack, the man said, was prompted by a heated argument over signing a prenuptial agreement prior to marriage. The victim attempted to escape from the defendant multiple times. That's got to be embarrassing if you're a guy, you know that? Just to admit to the cops, I tried to get away multiple times, but she just beat the holy Hogan out of me. I mean, you know.
She meant business.
Yeah, I guess. The victim attempted to escape from the defendant multiple times and was ultimately separated from Hogan by witnesses who corroborated his account of the incident. There were witnesses, Jess.
Oh, so sad.
Who were like, yeah, we were laughing and laughing and laughing. Then we finally realized he needed help. So we just helped him out. Police allege that one witness, the victim's brother, was bitten on the arms by Hogan. How would you like to be the brother who got bit on the arms?
Oh my gosh, she was just losing it.
So the brother's bitten on the arms by his sister as he sought to stop her from battering his sibling. Alcohol appears to have been a factor, believe it or not, in the 11:30 p.m. confrontation.
Shocking.
Yeah. Probably shouldn't drink and do the prenup.
Yikes.
You might want to be sober for that deal. An arrest affidavit does not offer additional details about the prenup dispute or whether the wedding set for Saturday, July 27th was still on. My guess is they didn't get married.
Wow, I don't know. Some people are just, they're okay with the drama. They like it.
Do you take this bride to bite your wiener off? Because I'm sure
You take this bride to slap you around.
Yeah. Do you like it rough? Because you're in for a lifetime of rough, son. Just saying. Hogan was arrested for domestic battery and simple battery. Wasn't simple for him. For allegedly biting the witness and booked into the county jail on the misdemeanor counts. She was released from custody this past week on her own recognizance. A judge ordered Hogan to have no contact with her prospective future husband or brother-in-law. At least not before the supposed wedding, right?
I was going to say, that's going to make the ceremony kind of tricky. Just to stay 100 yards away.
Or a little exciting. It's going to make the honeymoon spicy, isn't it? Huh? Maybe he likes a little slap and tickle. Maybe it's building up for the, I shouldn't say that before the not safe for work deal, but.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So she'll be allowed a one-time visit to her residence in the company of police to retrieve personal belongings. So she can go in and get her stuff. Be like, honey, I miss you. A wedding registry remained online, welcoming friends and family to join our epic journey.
Oh, gosh.
It's not without a few pitfalls. The registry seeks cash gifts to help pay for table centerpieces, a wedding cake, flowers, and an open bar. Maybe
and bail.
And bail, yes. Thank you, Jess. Bail. Maybe they should skip the open bar. Seems to be an issue with the two of them.
No kidding.
Just saying. So there you go. Our next story has to do with a real estate developer who, let's face it, may be successful in one venture, but he just can't be successful at another, which would be killing his wife.
Oh.
He's not a closer when it comes to that, Jess. And closers get cookies. I've learned that from a certain kids movie.
Oh, closers get cookies.
Yeah. I know it's supposed to be closers get coffee, but in the kids movie, it's closers get cookies.
I like cookies better anyway.
Yeah, closers get cookies. This is how the feds unfurled a high-powered real estate developer's multiple plots to kill his wife via fentanyl poisoning, hit and runs, and fake armed robberies. Of course, we're going to Florida, Jess, because you don't make multiple attempts to kill your wife unless you live in Florida.
Good old Florida.
That's right. You notice I never say multiple attempts to kill your wife. We're going to Montana.
Yeah.
That never happens, right?
Not very often. No.
It's always, we're going to Florida, where a wealthy South Florida real estate developer allegedly tried to kill his wife of over 30 years. Okay, the question, and I have to stop at this point. The question here is, you've been together for 30 years. What's 30 more?
I don't know. Must be really, really unbearable.
Why now? Did you just get successful at the real estate game and went, she's got to go? I mean, what? What's so bad? It's been 30 years.
I don't think we can understand it, Tim. We're not criminal enough in our minds.
I guess not. Okay, so this South Florida real estate developer allegedly tried to kill his wife of over 30 years by poisoning her with fentanyl. So after 30 years, people are going to buy that she developed a fentanyl habit? Okay, number one, strike one, bad idea.
Yeah.
Hiring two separate bands of hitmen to murder her in a scheme that rivals episodes of Miami Vice, which is always fun. Gotta love a good Miami Vice, episode, even though it's almost 40 years old now. Can you believe that? Sergio Pino died by suicide Tuesday as FBI agents were set to arrest him at his Coral Gables mansion for solicitation for murder. So if you can't kill the wife, take yourself out, I guess is the, yeah.
Yeah.
Now 9 other people are facing charges in the murder for hire plots to kill Pino's wife, Tatiana. Ooh, it's spicy. Ready for this, Jess?
Yes.
Here's how the story goes. Feds allege that Sergio Pino became enraged after his wife filed for divorce in 2022. Well, at least she was trying to get away from him. That's that.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Yeah, probably a good idea. This case is about a husband, Mr. Pino, who decided after years of marriage that he was going to kill his wife. Mackenzie LaPointe, who is the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, told reporters at a press conference. According to a criminal complaint, Pino tried to poison his wife multiple times and hired people to kill her in a hit-and-run crash. He also allegedly paid people to set his sister-in-law's vehicle on fire. Nice guy.
Wow.
Yeah. When those attempts failed, he hired a second group of people to murder her and make it look like an armed robbery gone wrong. Around 11:30 a.m. on June 23rd, Tatiana Pino returned home and idled in the driveway at the gate to enter the property. As she began to drive inside, a man later identified as Vernon Green allegedly came running out of a Dodge Ram pickup, armed with a gun and wearing a beanie, face covering, and yellow boots. Tatiana Pino slammed on the gas, squeezing her car between a fence and a tree and into the backyard, with Green allegedly giving chase. She honked the horn numerous times in an attempt to alert others to her danger. Green came up to the car and pointed a pistol with a silver slide inches from Pino's adult daughter's face, who had come out from the house after hearing the commotion. That, according to the complaint. Green grabbed the daughter's arm and ordered her to go inside the house. Oh my God. The suspect ran back into the pickup and fled the scene with the help of a getaway driver, per the complaint. Agents recovered surveillance camera footage from throughout the neighborhood that showed that people in the truck were working in tandem with people in a Tesla. The videos reportedly showed the suspects casing the home earlier in the day and making their move when Tatiana Pino returned home. Feds tracked the Tesla's license plate back to a home in Miami. They also recovered license plate reader photo from May that showed the Dodge Ram, which had an aftermarket LED light on the front bumper. There's a bad move to get recognized. In front of the home where they found the Tesla. All kinds of mistakes made here. Feds recovered the truck the day after the attempted murder, not far from the Pino residence. So they live nice and close, Jess.
No.
Cops discovered the truck had been stolen from the Orlando area in March. The suspects had also swapped the license plate with another Dodge Ram to further avoid detection. Federal agents later learned that Sergio Pino had allegedly offered the suspects $150,000 to carry out the hit on his wife, and another $150,000 should Pino's involvement in the plot not be revealed. Somebody didn't make $150,000. I'm just saying.
No.
He gave the hitman a deadline of June 24th to murder his wife so she could not attend the couple's next divorce proceedings. Classy. The suspects began surveilling Tatiana Pino on June 11th, according to the complaint. Feds uncovered several phone calls and meetings between the hitmen. They also listened to a July 15th phone call between two of the suspects, Fausto Villar and Avery Bivens, where Villar told Bivens to lay low until the smoke clears. That according to the affidavit. Villar also allegedly told Bivens to delete his Instagram and phone call logs and to get rid of his burner phone. A separate criminal complaint details Pino's previous attempts to kill his wife, Tatiana Pino, when she was returning home from a divorce proceeding on August 30th of 2023, when a man in a Home Depot flatbed truck rammed her car as she returned home. The truck had been waiting for her outside of her home, and it was apparent that this was an intentional act and not an accidental collision, according to the complaint. Tatiana Pino previously said in divorce proceedings that she suspected her husband was poisoning her. That according to Miami NBC affiliate WTVJ. She said in a deposition that she had been suffering from an unknown ailment for at least 2 years. Doctors originally thought it was epilepsy, but specialists at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore uncovered the cause of her health problems as fentanyl use. So she was being poisoned.
Terrible.
Isn't that terrible? An attorney for Sergio Pino, Sam Rabin, said his client is innocent. Of course.
I don't think so.
No. Sadly, I no longer have a living client to allow me to respond to the government's new allegations, he told the Miami Herald. That is because prosecutors ignored my emails and phone conversations where I volunteered to surrender Mr. Pino if they wanted to arrest him. Although I have not seen any of the evidence that the government claims to have, the narrative that they are putting forth is contrary to the person and character of Sergio Pino. That's convenient to say after he's killed himself.
Yeah, right.
Right? Sergio Pino began Century Home Builders Group in 1995. He estimated his and his wife's combined wealth to be $153 million.
What?
Yeah.
Dang, he wouldn't even miss that if she got half of it in the divorce. Why is he so bent on killing her?
Right. And on top of it,
Crazy.
why off yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think he just knew he was done for and he couldn't imagine a life in prison.
That's
She's beautiful, though. Do you have a picture of her with your article?
I don't believe I do.
So, I'm just sitting over here Googling things. My turn to hold up a picture for you.
Oh my gosh.
Right? She's gorgeous.
That dude outkicked his coverage. He looks like Paul Sorvino.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
looks like what's a good Sarah Jessica Parker.
I can see that. Yeah, with dark hair. She's very pretty.
Yeah, she is very pretty. But yeah, in the picture I have of him, this is his real estate picture. So he of course looks a lot better than that picture.
Yes.
That's probably 10 years or 20 years and 50 pounds ago.
Yeah, yeah. That kind of like I do with my author photo. 10 years ago, 20 pounds earlier.
Whatever. I think you look better now than your author photo.
Oh, you're so nice.
Seriously. No, that's just my opinion, but
that's why we're friends, Tim.
Oh, thanks. But no, I seriously, the guy did completely outkick his coverage. He did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If I were him, I would have kissed her ass from now until the end of time. But that's
no, like, look at my beautiful wife. How lucky am I to have this eye candy on my arm?
Right. But then, yeah, he just, he ruined it. But I mean, 153 million. Okay. So he loses, but see, Florida is one of those states where he wouldn't necessarily have missed half of it. He probably could have settled. I don't believe they're an alimony state.
I mean, she might have been happy with just 50 million.
Yeah.
Or,
yeah,
I could just take like 20 and be okay. I'd be like 20 million. That's fine.
Yeah, he probably could have settled for something and
get myself a nice little mansion on the bay.
Right. But instead he panics, and I don't know. It's just, some people are bizarre. They just,
what a dummy.
Maybe he fancied himself a kingpin or something. Who knows? I don't know. Let's move on to our next story. This is a bizarre one. It involves food and drug trafficking.
Okay, I'm interested.
I am too, aren't I? Yeah. Anytime, and especially lasagna. Are you a big lasagna fan?
Who doesn't love lasagna?
I make a killer lasagna. I haven't.
Do you?
Yeah, I haven't made one in a couple of years, but I make a killer lasagna. So here's the deal, Jess. A drug smuggle bid was thwarted by a lasagna anomaly. A prison nurse aide was busted for drug trafficking. But here's how. You gotta love lasagna in more ways than one. A nurse aide was responsible for distributing medicine to inmates at an Indiana prison and has been charged with trying to smuggle cocaine and marijuana into the facility via a bowl of frozen lasagna. A bowl of frozen lasagna?
Wow, that's kind of weird.
That is, isn't it? No wonder you got caught. Normally it's a nice pan.
Yeah, they're like, this isn't a pan of piping hot lasagna. It's a freaking bowl. It's frozen. That's kind of nasty.
Let's check it for drugs.
Yeah.
Right.
Clearly suspicious.
That's right. As alleged in court documents, 46-year-old Regina Davis arrived for work earlier this month at the Indiana State Prison, where the property of employees, including their lunch or dinner, passes through an x-ray machine before they enter. The maximum security lockup houses more than 2,000 adult male prisoners and is located 45 miles east of Chicago. As Davis's lasagna moved through the x-ray machine, a guard thought the Italian delicacy looked a little odd, so he sought the opinion of a colleague who concurred that something did not appear natural about the delicacy. When investigators subsequently dug through the lasagna, they found several packages wrapped in electrical tape that contained coke, about 3 ounces of it to be exact, and pot, about 1.7 ounces. That's a whole lot of oregano in that deal.
That is.
Yeah. During questioning, Davis, by the way, here's what Davis looks like. She doesn't look like she could cook a lasagna to save her life. I'm just saying.
She doesn't look very Italian. I'll give you that.
No. She probably looks like she makes the worst lasagna in the world. Just not that I judge anyone by their looks as to whether they can make lasagna, but
I think her lasagna comes in a box in the freezer.
It says Stouffer's, right?
Stouffer's, yeah.
She even eats that. I think she probably eats the Encore lasagna and enjoys it.
Oh, yeah. Or does Banquet make lasagna? That's probably the cheapest one.
Yeah. I think she loves a good Banquet lasagna. I'm not judging. If you like Banquet lasagna, fine. Fine, you do. Or if you love a good Encore lasagna, fine. It's probably an economic thing. I don't judge either. If that's what you got to buy, that's what you got to buy.
I do kind of have a soft spot for Banquet frozen meals because we ate a lot of those as kids.
And that's fine.
I kind of now I have a hankering for one. I kind of want to go get one just for fun.
Like a Banquet chicken pot pie.
Oh yeah, those are the best. They're so full of sodium though. Those are terrible for you.
You know what? The Banquet fried chicken was actually really good.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
anything with like the mashed potatoes in it.
Yeah. See, the Banquet fried chicken I'm down with. I could eat that all day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where were we again?
I don't know. She smuggled lasagna.
Yeah, she smuggled lasagna. Okay. So when investigators dug the lasagna, several packages, Coke, pot, 3 ounces, 1.7 ounces. During questioning, Davis claimed she had been at a female friend's house the prior evening getting a tattoo, Jess. When the woman gave her 2 containers of lasagna to eat, Davis claimed not to know that the grub was stuffed with contraband. Isn't that funny how that happens? You're just sitting
That is funny.
You ever go over to a girlfriend's house and she's like, hey, let me give you a tattoo, girl. By the way, take this lasagna to work with you. Did that ever happen?
No.
No? And she just happens to load it up with Coke and pot for you? I mean, that's a typical girls' night out, isn't it?
My friends are so boring.
Home tattoos and drugs. drug-addled meals. I mean,
nope.
I hear my sisters talking about that all the time. I'm just saying, they're like, hey, we're going over for tattoos and drug-fueled meals. Sure. It's unclear if the lasagna also contained tiny meatballs. That's actually in the copy. After Davis reportedly agreed to allow her phone to be searched, investigators found photos of the wrapped drug packages that were taken a day earlier.
Oh.
Yeah, her story then changed. Whoops, I forgot about the pictures. You got me. Davis claims she had been getting calls from unknown numbers from unknown individuals who threatened her safety and that of her brother, who she said had just been released from a prison work release program in South Bend. Davis said she had been instructed to go with a black guy, that's in quotes, to pick up the drugs, some of which she admitted wrapping herself because you only wrap that which you care to send, which is the very best, right? I mean, it's a Hallmark deal.
Totally.
The narcotics, she added, would be picked up in the prison by an individual who stopped by the drug room, that's quote unquote, where she works. The courier would say they were there to pick up some cream for their feet. So the lasagna tastes like cream for your feet?
That's so gross.
It's probably the cream cheese or
I think I'd rather ask for hemorrhoid cream than cream for my feet. I don't know why that just sounds so nasty.
yeah, I'd like some cream for my feet. Well, we got some of this cottage cheese here inside the lasagna. I mean, I can't imagine she uses real ricotta in her.
No, definitely not.
She probably goes cheap. According to Indiana state records, Davis has been licensed as a nurse's aide for more than 20 years. She's also been certified as a qualified medication aide. Not just giving out Coke and pot, she hasn't, I'll tell you that much. After completing additional training and demonstrated competency while dispensing and passing medications and or applying administrating treatments. So by all means, if you go to Indiana State Prison, ask for the cream for your feet and you'll get something else. Ha-ha! Get a little something that'll have you running around the prison all day.
Get y'all fired up.
That's right. I need a little cream for my feet. Keep me running all day. Just saying. That's all I need. Cream for my feet. We're coming up on the not safe work part of our program here in just a couple of stories. I'm just forewarning you in case you got kids around. Actually, we're going to get to it now. So if you have kids around, usher them out of the room quickly. If you're at work, you're going to want to do this. Besides belch loudly into my microphone, you're going to want to put on your earbuds, and you're going to want to keep the volume away from the boss because these next stories could be misconstrued as something else entirely. So, yeah, that's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to do that in 5, 4, 3, 2, and here we go. Our next story has to do with a screw job that landed a mother behind bars.
Oh.
It sounds dirty, I know, but
it does.
This is a literal screw job, as in with a drill and a screw. As a woman, a 40-year-old woman allegedly drove a screw into a 12-year-old girl's buttocks.
Oh, dang.
I know, right?
That's terrible.
That is terrible. By the way, this is what this woman looks like. She looks like she probably doesn't know the meaning of a light spanking.
Yeah. How come everyone looks so angry in these photos?
I know, right?
I mean, they're mugshots, but still.
I know. Oh, well, she has kind of a wry smile on her face, kind of like,
yeah, evil.
I'd like to drive a screw into your butt, you know. So this story starts off this way, Jess, and this is why it's in the not safe for work category. Have you ever been screwed in the ass? That's what it says.
Dang.
I know, right? That's how it starts. That is how the story starts. I didn't make it up. It says it in the first line of the story. Yeah. That is what a 40-year-old woman allegedly asked her daughter before using an electric screwdriver to direct a screw into the 12-year-old victim's rear end.
What is wrong with this woman?
Right? Would you ever say that to your daughter and then use an electric screwdriver and put a screw in her butt?
I can't even fathom this. This is so disturbing.
It's beyond disturbing.
Man.
As detailed in an arrest affidavit, Jacqueline Gazinski and 3 children were hanging picture frames in a Florida residence. Of course, we're going to Florida.
Freaking Florida.
Well, freaking is right. When the defendant used an electric screw gun and screwed a nail into the victim's left side buttocks after saying, "Have you ever been screwed in the ass?" Mother of the year. Questioned by police about the incident, Gazinski reportedly said that when the girl walked past her, she asked the victim, who is her 12-year-old, that's in quotes, about getting screwed in the ass. Gazinski, cops charged, placed a screw gun on the girl's left buttock cheek and pressed down on the trigger, driving the screw into her buttocks. The screw, which left a visible mark, was stuck in the girl's body until she took it out.
Gosh, poor girl. That's terrible.
Gazinski was arrested Friday evening by St. Petersburg police and was charged with felony child abuse, which is pretty light. She's being held in the county jail on $25,000 bond and has been ordered by a judge to have no contact with the victim. According to court filings in an ongoing small claims matter, Gazinski recently moved into a small 3-bedroom rental home in St. Petersburg. While court records contain no employment details, Gazinski has previously been licensed in Florida as an esthetician. So don't let her near any nails whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't want her coming at me with tweezers or hot wax or needles for injections. None of it.
Nothing. Because she might shove them God knows where. Just saying. We'll move on here in our not safe for work category. Today's dumb crime, stupid criminals. An overachieving pervert in New York City for Citibank internship tries raping a woman a day after groping another.
Wow.
Hence,
Class act.
Yeah. Hence the word overachieving pervert. A student at a prestigious business school was in the Big Apple for a summer internship at Citibank when he allegedly went on a sex crime spree, according to authorities. Right. Overachieving pervert Chamberlain Nwaiue, which is a hard name to say. It's Nwaiue. Nwaiue?
That's a tricky one, but you're nailing it.
Yeah. 21-year-old rising senior at Indiana University's Kelley School of Business tried to rape one of his victims the day after being freed without bail in another attack. That, according to cops and Manhattan prosecutors. The twisted suspect later boasted to cops about his knowledge of women. Really? And claimed his eye contact with his attempted rape victim beforehand was enough of an invitation for him to come to her apartment, Jess.
What the heck?
Some of these guys out there, I tell you.
You're just not even going to make eye contact with dudes now.
Right? I don't get some guys. I really don't. When you've had interactions with the opposite sex for a while, you can read the signals, he went on to say. It was like an invitation to come to her apartment and see what's up, the sicko said, according to newly released court documents. Nwaiue told police that he had been in the city for about a month and was working for Citibank when he was arrested in his first attack on June 27th. Nwaiue, who was from Indianapolis, lasted just 10 days at a Citibank internship before he was fired for behavioral issues. It's probably 10 days too many. Adding that the suspect got the boot before the first attack. This individual is not a city employee. He was terminated within 2 weeks of starting his internship because of complaints about his behavior, a Citibank rep told the Post. That's the New York Post. In the June 27th incident, the suspect assaulted a woman at the corner of Perry and Bleecker Streets in the heart of Greenwich Village by sliding his hand down her pants and squeezing her butt.
What?
In broad daylight.
What a freak.
The perv then tried kissing the woman before she screamed for help. That, according to prosecutors who charged Nui with forcible touching and sexual abuse in the attack. Prosecutors asked for $5,000 bail for Nui. I know I keep butchering his name. Doesn't matter. Since he wasn't living permanently in the Big Apple, but Judge Valentina Morales opted for supervised release. Nui ended up attacking another woman just 24 hours later, according to authorities. Prosecutors said the creep's criminal behavior escalated with the attempted rape of the second woman in her East 95th Street apartment in East Harlem, where he followed the victim, who was walking her dog, inside her building before forcing his way inside her room. The sex fiend then told the victim to fucking calm down and that he was going to have sex with her. Nice guy. That, according to Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Julia Hooks, adding that the victim was only saved when a doorman heard her cries for help. Well, thank God for the doorman, that's for sure.
Yeah.
When police came to the apartment, they found Nui holding the victim inside and arrested him. At the time the defendant was arrested, the man was in custody and made comments about other women that he saw, stating in substance, "I would F her." Book said that according to a court transcript.
What is wrong with this guy?
This guy's out of control.
Yeah, he's just cracked.
This is why you need chemical castration in courts. I mean,
no kidding.
Seriously. Nui allegedly tried downplaying the rape attempt to cops by bragging about how much he knew about women. Evidently not a goddamn thing. Sometimes you just, this is a quote from him, sometimes you just have interactions with the eyes and it's clear what's being said. Once you've done this for a while, it's pretty apparent. This guy's pretty.
Wow, how many people has he assaulted?
My guess is probably hundreds.
Yeah. That's really terrifying.
Completely tone deaf. Nui pleaded not guilty Monday to burglary in the first degree as a sexually motivated felony and attempted rape charges at his Manhattan Supreme Court arraignment, where Judge Curtis Farber held him on $100,000 cash bail, which is not hardly enough. Chamberlain studies finance and law, ethics, believe it or not, and decision-making at Indiana University.
All of which he is really bad at. Well, maybe not the finance part.
I got to think he's failing. He's failing all of it. He's at the Kelley School of Business there at Indiana University. The Kelley School of Business is ranked number 30 in the country, according to Bloomberg's top business school list. He listed himself as a member of the Kelley student government on his career profile, but the organization told the Post he's not involved or associated in any capacity whatsoever. Nui, well, however you say it, also claims to be a member of Goldman Sachs' emerging leaders list. Although they're taking him off that if he is. A 5-week mentorship program at the bank, according to his LinkedIn. The Legal Aid Society, which represents Nui, declined to comment. An Indiana University representative confirmed that he is a student at its Bloomington campus. He returns to court on November 4th. Yeah, throw the book at him.
Scary man.
He's soon to be an alumnus of Rikers Island, which will be, and he'll be specializing in touching his toes. Yeah. He's going to learn all about women because he's about to become one, Jess. That's what's going to happen at Rikers Island. He'll excel at putting on lipstick and a wig. And yeah, he'll learn a lot.
That sounds like justice to me. I'm okay with all of that.
Yeah. And he'll hear a lot of I'd fuck her, because he'll hear that from the inmates when he gets to Rikers. So yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, he's got to pick a new name. So that'd be fun. That'd be fun for him. Don't mean to get so obscene, folks, but that's just the way it is. And our final story today on Dumb Crimes, Stupid Criminals. This sent to me by Chris. Chris sent me a story just today, as a matter of fact, about a prison officer. Speaking of prison, prison officer who had sex with an inmate on video. And
What?
she has pleaded guilty.
Oh,
Look at the look in your eye.
I did not see that coming.
You're like, what? That's right, Jess. A Brazilian OnlyFans star who was filmed having sex with an inmate in jail tried to flee the UK before she was arrested at Heathrow Airport.
Was she doing this for her OnlyFans account?
You got it, kid.
Wow.
Linda D'Souza Abreu, 30-year-old prison officer, is facing jail after the clip in MHP Wadsworth was shared on social media. In the footage, Ms. D'Souza Abreu, who appeared on a swingers show on Channel 4, is seen with convicted burglar 36-year-old Linton Wyrick as her discarded radio constantly crackles with messages from colleagues. She didn't even turn down the radio.
Wow. She's an interesting lady.
Yeah, she is. Ms. D'Souza Abreu of Fulham, southwest London, admitted one charge of misconduct in public office when she appeared at Isleworth Crown Court. Her charge sheet states that her conduct amounted to an abuse of the public's trust in the office holder by engaging in a sexual act with a prisoner in a prison cell. That's a mouthful. Actually, that's what he said. You got a mouthful? Let's put it on the internet. While wearing a white blazer and black top, she showed no emotion after admitting the single charge. By the way, you thought the housewife was striking. There's a picture of our chargee.
What?
Yeah, take a look at that.
They can't let her be a prison guard with men.
How would you like to be locked up with her, huh?
Man, there'd be a lot of guys committing crimes on purpose.
Hey, I would. I'd get locked up with her if I'm going to be on OnlyFans. I'll tell you that much. I don't know. At that point, I'd just hang myself in my cell because I don't need anything else after that. Just saying. Eloise Marshall KC prosecuting told the court a police interview recorded with the inmate in the video contains information that will be the subject of further investigation. First of all, why would you squeal after that?
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
I mean, bragging maybe.
I think that's what it was. He was bragging. I'm on the video. Or I'm on the video because he's in England. Martin Edmonds KC, the judge, bailed Ms. D'Souza Abreu ahead of sentence on November 7th. He has ordered a pre-sentence report. Ms. D'Souza Abreu's Portuguese passport must remain in police possession. She cannot apply for any international travel documents and is barred from entering any UK travel ports. She's also subject to an electronically monitored curfew between 7 p.m. and 9 a.m. each day. Yathree I believe it is Yogaraj, her lawyer, probably the other guy getting it on video, is saying, hey, it's called bail me out, if you know what I mean. Earlier described her as a young mother and person of good character.
Oh, wow.
Huh? That'll look nice on the tagline of the next porn she shoots. The officer had telephoned the prison as she fled to Heathrow Airport to say that she was not returning to work and that her husband would return her equipment. Is that a literal thing? Like return her equipment? See it on
wait, and she's married?
Yeah, she's married. Well, hey, hubby can share if he's making part of that profit. You know what I mean?
I guess. I mean, I'm sure she makes a lot of money. She's really beautiful.
Yeah. I'm guessing that OnlyFans makes a little bit of money. Tedda Turkson, the senior Crown prosecutor, said this was a shocking breach of the public's trust. Oh, for say. D'Souza was clearly an enthusiastic participant who wrongly thought she would avoid responsibility. I like that, enthusiastic participant.
Yeah. We can use our imaginations.
Very enthusiastic, especially when you get paid for it. The CPS recognizes there's no excuse for any prison officer who conducts themselves in such a manner, and we will never hesitate to prosecute those who abuse their position of power. is what they went on to say. After working closely with the Metropolitan Police to build the strongest possible case, D'Souza had no option but to accept that she was guilty. She will now rightly face the consequences of her actions. They're getting so hard and tough up in there. Notice I said hard. A prison service spokesman said staff corruption is not tolerated, and the former prison officer allegedly featured in this video has been reported to the police and been reported to the top 10 of OnlyFans, because a lot of people are going to watch that video. I'm just saying. So that'll do it for Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminal.
That was a good one to end on. That came from Chris?
That came from Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. So, Jess, we got dates up for the Palmer House for Ghost Stories, Inc. Those are up and going.
Yep, and there's still a discount code. If you'd like to join us, you can use darkness20, all capital letters, to get 20% off your ticket.
There you go. There you go. Also, Jess has 2 books that are in pre-sale right now. There's a link in the description of this program. Go get those books as well. So there you go. I want to thank Robert Conlin for being on the show today. The book, The Lewiston Shootings, an All-American Tragedy, is available right now by Wild Blue Press. There's a link in the description of this program to get that book. I encourage you to do so as well. I want to thank Robert again for being on the show. Tomorrow, Supernatural News. And then, Jess, on Thursday, here's your tease. We're talking ghosts and some classic ghost stories.
Ooh, I'm going to like that one.
So that's coming up on Thursday. That'll do it for Jessica Freeburg. I'm Tim Dennis. Thank you so much for listening today to the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday.
For more True Crime Tuesday audio and video archives, go to darknessradioshow.com. Thanks for watching.